All right, and we're back. It's March already, Mark. Can you believe that?
I know.
It's crazy, right?
You know what it is? The first 6 months of a year always go very fast, and then the second 6 months go a lot slower. And the third 6 months goes even faster.
Yeah, it's crazy. Move the mic closer to your pie hole. Thank you.
How's this, Wade?
That's slightly better, but yeah.
You can tell. After all these years, we're still not much of a production, are we?
It's a mobile studio. It's a mobile studio. It has to be, so that we're agile. So we're still in kind of Oscar cleanup mode a little bit with the movies get released. The weeks that roll by after are, of course, loaded with lots of Oscar contenders that are hoping to capitalize on the possibility of having won Oscars. They roll the dice, right? You think, okay, we stand a good chance of winning an Oscar, so we'll set our Blu-ray and DVD release date for a week or two after, maybe the day after, or 2 days after, as it was this year, and maybe we'll win something. And very often they don't. So we may as well get right into it, Mark.
Yes, we should.
We have a ton of we got foreign films that I'm hoping we'll get to. So let's get right to it. Let's talk about a film that was considered at one moment in time to be a possible Oscar contender, Oscar-winning director. Certainly had the pedigree, right?
Not just an Oscar-winning director. Wait a minute.
Yeah.
At somebody whose last film made us think, wow, Ron Howard might have his mojo back again.
He might. It looked
right?
it looked good
terrific.
for a moment. Sure, Rush was great. My favorite film of that year. That was amazing.
And then, what does he follow up Rush with? In the Heart of the Sea.
Which, you know what? I mean, look, the idea here was, let's go back to the original story that underlies Moby Dick, and let's tell the original story, which sometimes, that's a double-edged sword, right? Because sometimes the original story ain't so hot. There's a reason why they get turned into novels and loosely fictionalized stories, because somebody saw something and said, you know what, not such a great story, but I can make it better. Case in point, Hamlet, okay? The Danish director who did Babette's Feast, whose name's completely skipping me, but he, some years later, made a movie about the actual real story behind Hamlet, starring Gabriel Byrne. I mean, this goes back 25 years, but it was like really dull, because the real story, they live in mud huts, and the king is like a king of 10 people, and it's like really medieval and really dressed down and not very interesting at all. And you realize Shakespeare was you need to dress that up a little bit. There's some embellishment required. So here I thought, well, it's not better than Moby Dick. I mean, it's flamboyant. It's got lots of CG.
How could this movie ever be better than Moby Dick?
That's the thing.
Look, if you want to see, there's so many other films that tackle, seafaring, maritime, material better. Just go ahead and watch the Moby Dick with the horribly miscast Gregory Peck, but still, it's a great Moby Dick.
Written by Ray Bradbury.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I read the book. Ray Bradbury wrote a book.
Yeah.
About the making of the writing of the script, and I read that book. And if you read that book and you watch the movie, A, you don't have to read Moby Dick. You don't have to read Moby Dick.
Yeah.
And B, you don't have to see this film.
Well, anyway, it takes place 1820, and of course it stars Chris Hemsworth, who is nice and square-jawed and rugged and fits the part perfectly. It misses all of the sort of the fundamental, elemental, dramatic components of Moby Dick. It doesn't feel very well constructed, and it's just kind of a director's showpiece. That said, this may wind up being one of the last sort of non-superhero, non-tentpole 3D movies released to Blu-ray. I mean, the 3D is kind of going away.
3D is going away.
It's going away, like we said it would. But I don't see any period films showing up in 3D for a very long time, if ever again. So this may be the last one.
Well, let's hope so.
Yeah,
because right now, now the the home electronic manufacturers, now they're all about the Ultra HD and the 4K.
Yep.
They turned their attention to something else.
To 4K
3D
completely.
did not happen.
Nope, didn't happen. So if you got a 3D TV and 3D Blu-rays and the goggles and the whole deal, hang on to it because you are going to be able to eBay that stuff in like 5 years for about $1.25. It'll be awesome.
Like my Vectrex. I have a Vectrex. I used to have a
know
Vectrex.
you do. I love Vectrex still. I still do.
Do
you really?
Oh, I owned a Vectrex. Yeah, when it came out.
You still have it?
Oh God, no.
Oh.
I think I sold it to somebody. Now you're going to kill me for this. I think I sold it to somebody for $40. This is like 15 years ago.
I would have bought it from you for $40. That was the best game ever with the little joysticks and the whole. Oh, that was the best.
Yes, it was in black and white. The monitor was in black and white, and they gave you with each game you bought. Each game you bought came with this plastic color overlay to simulate the game being in color.
Now I've got to go onto eBay and buy myself a Vectrex. I'll bet I can get one for like $10.
You know what? Let's waste more time.
All right.
On the show by talking about Vectrex.
So,
I'm going to see how much they are right now.
Blu-ray 3D, Blu-ray, DVD, and Ultraviolet all on the same thing. Lots of special features. Really interesting stuff, actually, believe it or not. Even though the movie is not that good, a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff with Ron Howard and how the movie was planned and put together. And, the original story. I mean, it's really, really rather elaborate. So it's a good set. I mean, the movie is lacking, but...
Here it is, $338 of Vectrex.
Really? $338?
Yep.
Okay. So on the other side of the equation is a film that actually won an Academy Award. It only won one, but it won one, which continues to affirm the fact that films that win the Audience Award at the Toronto Film Festival continue to be Oscar contenders because it was also nominated for Best Picture. And we are, of course, talking about Room, which won Brie Larson a very deserved Best Actress, finally, at long last. For years, she has been right there in the LAFCA Best Actress conversation for movies that nobody sees. It's been like every year for 5 years. People are like, "Oh, Brie Larson in the bottle that found its way up the side of a mountain," and you're like, "What? Who? Where? What?"
You know what else it proves? It proves that when the Academy expanded their Best Picture nominees from 5 to 10, these are the films that wound up slipping in, not Star Wars.
True.
And not the Avengers.
How do you feel about Room?
I felt I'm a bit in the minority about Room. I felt that Room took a very respectable, good shot at a very tough subject and didn't quite hit the target for me.
Yeah.
Now, I don't have kids, so it's possible that people with kids think that it hits them on a different level.
Yeah.
For me, you had to spend the first hour. It's a very noble attempt, but to me, you had to spend the first hour. The first hour of that film is very well shot.
Yeah.
Right?
It is.
It's claustrophobic, but yet you don't feel like you're going to kill yourself.
True.
And so you have to, that first hour has to be so incredible that the second hour just feeds off that. And I didn't feel like I spent enough time in the room for the second hour to affect me as much as I was hoping. But I'm in the minority.
Yeah, it's a very tender subject. I think everybody knows what it's about now. If you don't, I'm not going to tell you. But it's one of the best films I've seen about the relationship between a parent and a child. Jacob Tremblay is amazing as the son. He's just phenomenal. She's amazing.
She's great.
She's great. And I got to say, here's what really most impressed me. It's based on a novel, for those who don't know. Lenny Abramson, who directed it, I think has really come of age as a director. He was never on anybody's lips before. He was one of those directors that's sort of, there in the back of your head and you're aware. But the thing that's amazing to me about this film is that there are moments in the film that are coming. You're like, okay, I get it. I understand the premise. I know where we're going to go emotionally. I know where you're going to, you're going to turn the screws and you want me to cry here and you want me to cheer here. And you know that those moments are coming because otherwise there'd be no reason to even have the film. It would just, the only other place you could go would be a pit of such unbelievable depression that no one would want to, why even make the movie? So you know that those moments are coming, those moments of elation and, catharsis. And you prepare yourself for it because we've all had those emotions in movies before. We're familiar with them. And so you steel yourself for it and you say, okay, it's coming. I know it's coming. I know how I'm going to feel. I dare you to actually measure up to the best that I know that those moments can be. And son of a bitch, he beats it. He gives you even stronger moments than are coming. And I got to give him credit for that. As a director, to take a moment, an emotional moment, and the audience is expecting it, and they know how they want to feel, and then to exceed that is really quite a gift. So I think he's. I think the second half of the film is weaker than the first because it's sort of anticlimactic. It relies on a different set of emotions. But that being said, there's really no way around it. He kills it where he has to kill it.
Yeah, and again, it's really her film. It's
totally her film.
If she did not deliver, then it just would have been an exercise in. It would have been too melodramatic, is what would have happened. Listen
to the commentary here with Lenny Abramson and various crew members. It is really, really worth listening to. There aren't a lot of commentaries these days that I feel give you anything new. This one does. It is really, really worth listening to. And then there are some featurettes, and that's about it. But otherwise, it's wonderful. This is a Blu-ray with digital HD. It is from Lionsgate, which means it is ultraviolet. So enjoy that.
We have Youth.
Hated it.
The new from what's his name? Sorrentino.
Sorrentino.
And Sorrentino also directed the Great Beauty to Oscar-winning success, a film that I loved. This one, I just think this thing is just a misfire. It's with Michael Caine and Harvey Keitel. They play these they're lifelong friends. They're vacationing in the Swiss Alps, and it just becomes this really unbelievable. Oh, wait, hang on. Who texted me?
Someone texted you?
Yes.
Just now?
Yes, I'm very actually, it's the birthday boy.
Oh, well, very good.
After this podcast is done, I need to go to a birthday party.
That's beautiful.
Put it out there. Anyway, it's they're in the Swiss Alps, and I just think this thing is it's overwrought.
Oh, it's
and
horrible.
And it's pretentious, and I never bought it, and it's just too up its own butt.
Yeah, I agree.
You know?
I agree. Here's the thing. My problem with Sorrentino. Sorrentino has, now that he's won an Oscar, he won an Oscar for the Great Beauty.
Which I loved.
Which I don't particularly love, but I get it. But the thing is, he's always been kind of posturing himself as the new Fellini. And in order to do that, and he seems to have missed the fact that before Fellini became the guy that did all of this sort of overly artificial, theatrical weirdness with just strange things happening and all of this kind of orgiastic excess on the screen just for the sake of being indulgent, he actually made movies like La Strada, which were real movies. You know, they were earthy and they were heartfelt, and he sort of earned the right to go bananas. Sorrentino hasn't earned the right to go bananas. He's been making wacky, weird, excessive, indulgent movies from day one. So he hasn't really earned that in my mind yet. And then The Great Beauty is just like a Fellini homage. It's just completely parroting Fellini. So, and now it's just more of the same. And it's, you know what, I'm sorry, two guys hanging out at a resort in Switzerland with what's his face doing this weird little meditative stuff as well.
Oh, that scene where the monk levitates.
Oh, stop it! None of it makes any sense. It's threadbare, and he's indulgent now. I'm tired of it. I'm done with it. That said, Michael Caine and Harvey Keitel, I guess they're fine, but Paul Dano's just
that's right.
It's just freaking weird stuff. You know, Paul Dano is loves weird. You need to corral him. You need to rein him in. And then the last two of our new movies, before we get into our giant pile of classics, the first one is the Peanuts movie. Meh. Doesn't really disgrace Peanuts. The animation's good. They do good characterization. They certainly don't disgrace the look and the feel of Peanuts. The voice characterization is fine, but otherwise, it's just...
what's funny is
that... nothing remarkable. There was no reason for this movie to exist.
It so gave me everything I wanted that in the end I thought, isn't there anything else? Like, at least with a lot of these reboots, like JJ's Star Wars or Star Trek, he's giving you everything you want, but adding just enough so you feel it's like, at least it's new enough, I guess.
Yeah.
This one, it gives you everything you want, and yet at the end, it still feels a little empty.
Yeah, true. And Brian Schultz was producer on this, and as was Craig Schultz. So I mean, the Schultz family is represented. It's rated G. It's perfectly fine for kids. But I'll tell you this: my daughter, the thing that most excited her was that when they sent this to us, it came with a little plush Snoopy. She cannot leave that thing alone. She's been sleeping with it for 3 nights now.
Aww.
Yeah. And then the last one on the new film front is The Forbidden Room. Oh my gosh! Did you have a chance to watch this?
I did not.
Oh my gosh, Mark. Okay, first off, we have to point out this is Guy Madden.
Now here's the thing. I love Guy Madden.
Yeah.
So I don't like the fact that I missed this, but I did miss it.
Okay, so I just want you to look at the credit bed on the back.
Well, wait,
look at the credit bed.
Is this in color?
Partly.
A Guy Madden film in color?
partly.
Okay. The credit bed. That's a big-ass credit bed.
Yeah. Yes,
wow,
it is.
I've never seen a bigger one. I'm trying to see what it is.
Okay, so
1,
here's...
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's 9 lines of text.
Yes, it is. It's ridiculous.
Well, a lot of it is the cast.
It's the never-ending cast. Everyone shows up in this movie. You will not believe who shows up in this movie, and they all play like double and triple roles, and it's crazy. So no point in naming all the stars that show up in this. Guy Madden, of course, is the Winnipeg Canadian filmmaker who makes movies that look like the very odd satires and kind of eccentric genre films that they're always shot on film, except for he made one that was in digital, but they're all shot on film. They're shot on film that looks like it was shot in the 1930s and then stomped on and rolled over by a truck and scratched, and the sound is bad, and he just makes movies that look really weird and retro. So here's what The Forbidden Room is. You start with a guy lecturing you about the glory of baths. And then you go from that into a classic kind of 1940s submarine melodrama. A bunch of guys on a submarine, and it's so far beneath the surface they can't go up because then some of the ordnance on board will explode and kill them, but they're running out of air. And so what they do is they need to talk to the captain, who is in the Forbidden Room. He's locked up in his little Forbidden Room. Meanwhile, somehow, unexplained to anybody, a lumberjack is able to make his way onto the submarine. And when they ask him how he got on, he starts to tell his story. And his story is the story of him and a bunch of other lumberjacks having to rescue this woman, this dear woman of theirs, from this pack of weird kind of feral humans, the wolf pack, who live in caves somewhere in the mountains. And when he goes in there to liberate her, she has amnesia. And then from there, you go into her backstory, and then you go into somebody else's story, and then you see a newspaper headline which takes you into another story, and there's like a doctor, and he operates on a woman, and then she has plastic surgery, and then his brother...
You're talking a lot about a film that no one listening to this podcast will ever see.
But what I'm saying is, it's a compelling, fascinating movie, but it eventually comes full circle, and it wraps around itself and goes back inside itself and up its own intestines. But there are like 55 actors in this thing, and there are at least 27 different storylines that all kind of thread in and out and all over the thing. And ultimately you realize he's basically just written a satire, like a satirical pastiche of every old movie genre imaginable. And there are things in here that are hilarious and weird and hilarious and weird, but you got to know what you're in for. I mean, it's quite
it's a Guy Madden film.
It's quite
Every Guy Madden film, you got to know what you're in for.
It is the most Guy Madden-y movie I've ever seen.
All right, I'm going to make up for lost time because Wade could have talked about that for another 20 minutes. We finally have on Blu-ray the landmark documentary, The Decline of Western Civilization. Part 1 is on a Blu-ray, and then Decline of Western Civilization Part 2 is on a separate Blu-ray. You got to buy them separately. If you are not familiar with this film, then how dare you? It is from 1981, and it is this landmark look at the punk scene in Los Angeles at the time. Part 1 includes Black Flag, Circle Jerks, Fear, Germs, and X. It was produced and directed by Penelope Spheris, and the reason why people love this documentary is, even if you don't like the music, which, by the way, I kind of don't, these people are outrageously dressed. Their personalities are way out there. Their music is obnoxious. They lived in this weird drug and alcohol-fueled frenzy of the Los Angeles club scene back then. But Spheris, she doesn't look at their life with any sort of sarcasm or judgment. She has kind of a critical distance, and she looks at their life and what it really is. And so I think as a documentary, it really is very even-handed. It just sort of puts the camera on these bands and lets them go for better or ill. And it's amazing. It's very fresh, and some of the interviewees are just really funny and provocative and just a little crazy. And Decline of Western Civilization 1 is just a landmark documentary. 2 is not as successful. I mean, 2 is just great. That one has Faster Pussycat and Megadeth and a couple others. Also features Alice Cooper and Ozzy Osbourne. But really, you should definitely check out Decline 1, because that is the masterpiece right there.
Fantabulous. All right, and then got some double features here, just to cut these out of the equation. One's from Blue Underground. This is a kind of an old adventure action double feature of Code 7, Victim 5, and Mozambique. Both of these strictly B movies, but they're better than average B movies from the 1960s. They kind of a little bit of James Bond, a little bit of the beach movies, a little bit of kind of, go-go stuff. I mean, it's sort of in the same vein when they, all those the Dean Martin, Matt Helm films, and then the James Coburn Flint films, which sort of tried to take James Bond into an even groovier, kind of hippier. Yeah. It's a little bit of that on a B level. Steve Cochran stars in Mozambique. If you don't know who Steve Cochran is, he was a good B level, solid guy. And then Victim 7, Code 7, Victim 5 stars Lex Barker and Ronald Fraser. These are all totally solid, and you'll have a good time with this. So, that's worth checking out from Blue Underground. And then we have a couple from Scream Factory, the division of Shout Factory. This one is Millennium and Rotor. Rotor is an acronym, ROTOR, Judge, Jury, and Executioner. Kind of like a Judge Dredd figure. And Millennium, of course, is the a kind of a weird retro future cyberpunk noir. Both of these are from the 1980s when these things were, people were cranking these things out in the late 80s. It's when AFM was really just flooded with all this stuff, strictly because the video revolution created the straight-to-video boom, and these things were being cranked out for next to nothing. The best thing about this is that Cheryl Ladd is in Millennium, so I highly recommend it just because Cheryl Ladd is in it. Daniel J. Travanti is also in it. Then the other one is The Curse and The Curse 2, The Bite, as though it wasn't bad enough without The Bite, the first Curse. Not so good in these cases. These are also a couple of 1980s era straight-to-video genre films, trying to sort of trying to create a straight-to-video franchise at the time. The concept of The Curse is, basically the same as every other horror film at the time, which is that some kind of otherworldly thing came on a meteor. And next thing you know, it's people are transforming, kind of a pre-zombie film in some ways. But anyway, directed by David Keith, by the way, who also did Firestarter and went straight downhill from there. And then The Curse 2 is kind of more of the same with an even lesser cast that only has of any noteworthy in it. Anyone noteworthy? It's got Jamie Farr and Bo Svensson, who I saw at the market the other day.
You saw Jamie Farr at the market?
No, I saw Bo Svensson.
I thought you said Jamie Farr.
Jamie Farr and Bo Svensson, and I saw Bo Svensson at the market. I've never seen Jamie Farr.
Wait, is Jamie Farr still alive?
I don't know. That's a good question. We should check. We wouldn't know if he were. He's probably wearing a dress.
Oh.
But no, I saw Bo Svensson. Every time I see, and I've seen him, that's like 3 times in 20 years. But every time I see Bo Svensson, I always think, didn't Magnum kill you? It's the first thing that goes through my head. And then I go to the apples.
Now, did you see him in Malibu, one of those little convenience stores or supermarkets you're always seeing celebrities at?
I saw him at Gelson's. They all go to Gelson's.
Yeah, they all go to the Gelson's on Sunset Boulevard by the Pacific Palisades.
Yeah, that's where they all go. That's where I saw Sidney Pollack, and that's where Christmas Eve, honestly, Christmas Eve at that Gelson's is ridiculous. Everybody comes out of the woodwork. I see Martin Short there every year on Thanksgiving or the day before Thanksgiving, loading up for his big Thanksgiving feast, like 3 carts worth of food.
Now, do you get there when they open and then stay there until you see like 3-4 celebrities and then you're satisfied and you leave?
No. It's actually rare to see celebrities there, but there's certain days where they're all over the place.
Do you think Martin Short says, every time I go to Gelson's on Thanksgiving, I see Wade Major?
I see that guy. Yeah, I see that guy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. All right, couple Frankensteins for you because you can never have enough Frankenstein. Actually, I take that back. You can have enough Frankenstein, especially when they star Danny Houston. Now, Wade and I have this weird... Wait, I have this weird, irrational dislike of Danny Houston's acting.
We really do, but he's been good in a couple of things.
Yeah, sure.
I've liked him in a few things.
Yeah, okay,
I didn't mind him in Children of Men. I really didn't.
Well, Children of Men, I think is just even he couldn't destroy Children of Men. But it also has Carrie-Anne Moss, who we always like. Yeah. Anyway, this one directed by Bernard Rose. Bernard Rose is the guy who directed Candyman, so you know that this Frankenstein.
But he also did Immortal Beloved.
I know,
and he also did a not such a terrible version of
Star Wars.
Anna Karenina.
Really?
Yeah, starring Sophie Marceau. Wasn't bad.
Well, he's gone back to doing crap because, look, this is not like a real deal Frankenstein when the only reviews of this film online are all like bloodydisgusting.com, horrorfilms.org. Like nobody legitimate is really reviewing this film because it's just really just a horror film. And what I guess if you like this kind of stuff, it definitely gets more into the viscera of what the guy looks like and how he's like all disgusting and he starts to like devolve and lives in this weird environment where I guess if you want to treat it more like straight horror, this might be the Frankenstein for you, but it was not the Frankenstein for me. We also have Frankenstein, the miniseries. Now, this is from 2004.
Yeah, I remember this.
And it's got a terrific cast. It's got Donald
good,
Sutherland, William Hurt, Julie Delpy. And you sort of can't really, you can't knock the pedigree. I just think that this thing really was only notable for the makeup, which for the time was good. Actually, I believe it won an Emmy for Best Makeup. But I just think we got, between this and you remember I, Frankenstein, the one with Aaron Eckhart?
Yeah, which is horrendous.
Which is terrible.
Awful.
Unwatchable. The only Frankenstein movie that's really worth it.
Yeah.
Young Frankenstein.
Well, apart from the original and Bride of Frankenstein, the two James Whale films are pretty great.
No, just Young Frankenstein.
Just Young Frankenstein. Okay. Which, I got to say this. I know we never get. We never get political on this show per se, but honestly, in a week where everyone is talking about Donald Trump's manhood, everything is ridiculous all of a sudden. That picture, first of all, after Chris Christie came out and endorsed Trump, and Trump's giving that long speech, and Christie is standing behind him, just sort of looking dumbfounded, I kept thinking to myself, reminds me of something. It reminds me of something. What is it's like? This is nagging at me, and then I was like, Peter Boyle, right before they sing on stage. Peter Boyle standing there, same look on his face. It was like it was the living incarnation of Peter Boyle in that moment. I just thought that was so funny. Here's some really great stuff. Flickr Alley always comes up with some amazing stuff, especially when it's on Blu-ray. Marcel L'Herbier's L'Inhumaine. Without the accent, that would be Marcel L'Herbier's The Inhuman or The Inhumane from Lobster Films. This is now on Blu-ray from Flickr Alley, and it is absolutely dazzling. This is a 2-hour movie from 1924 that is one of the most fascinating silent films that I have never seen prior to this. This comes from the Black Hawk Films collection, which is, of course, David Shepard's collection. We gave a special award to David Shepard for all of his pioneering effort in preserving silent films at our LAFCA dinner. And everybody got behind this in doing a restoration recently. It's really kind of amazing how gripping this still is this many years after the fact. I was relatively unfamiliar with Marcel L'Herbier. I was unfamiliar with this film, and it's quite a discovery. It is visually a feast. It is a fascinating silent avant-garde movie that winds up being still very much ahead of its time. And you just have to see it. You got to get this. If you are a true cinephile, you definitely want to have this on your shelf. The idea here is that there is the title is named for the woman, this inhumane woman. She's kind of mad and lives just outside of Paris, and she is kind of what do you want to say? Not like a lady of the night, but she's. Well, no, but she's like a seductress. Let's just say she's a seductress, and it becomes it almost. Let me leave it here. I almost in watching this, it dawned on me that this may very well have been a tremendous inspiration for Sunset Boulevard on many levels. Let's leave it there. But it is a fascinating film and definitely needs to be seen. Beautiful visuals. They scanned it at 4K, so you could probably expect at some point when they start doing actual 4K Blu-rays that this film will be ready to rock and roll, and you're going to have to see it at that time. Really fascinating film. So, and then here are the mega goodies this week, Mark. We got 2 criterions, fantastic criterions. I Knew Her Well, which is a really cool 60s film from Antonio Pietrangeli. I don't pronounce Italian as well as I pronounce French. A movie from 1965, a great year. This is not a film that I had seen previously, but it is one of the coolest kind of 60s groove films I think I've ever seen. There are a lot of movies that sort of try to capture that moment in the 60s when everything in Europe was just, freewheeling and kind of libertine, and this is maybe the most realistic one that I've seen. The actress who stars in this, Stefania Sandrelli, is not your typical Italian ingenue from the period. She's not a sex bomb. She's she's beautiful, but there's something very earthy and very grounded about her. And as a result, you are really drawn into all of her kind of libertine, hedonistic lifestyle. And it's not really one that is that positive. It doesn't reflect positively on the 60s. It's actually quite a compelling and troubling film in many respects. Really, really well done. This is a 4K digital restoration with great audio, a new interview with the actress, and an interview with film scholar Luca Brattoni, all about
Luca Brasi from The Godfather?
Exactly, all about the director's career, and a bunch of other stuff, audition footage. It's really, really good. And then, here is the big mama. This is historic.
Yeah.
This is historic.
Buy this tomorrow.
The Graduate on Blu-ray. I don't need to tell you what the Graduate is. If you don't know what The Graduate is, a guy named Ivan will show up with a silencer at your doorstep in about 10 minutes because you have no reason to exist on this earth if you don't know The Graduate. 1967, Mike Nichols won Best Director for this, a legendary film. This was the year that In the Heat of the Night won Best Picture, but Jewison did not get Best Director. Mike Nichols won Best Director. One of those split years. Here's why this is so legendary. Back in the day of Laserdisc, The Graduate was one of the first really awesome Criterion Laserdiscs. And it had, among its many amazing extras, it had an audio commentary by a UCLA professor named Howard Suber, which vanished once Laserdisc vanished. And that commentary became a treasured thing. I think there were bootlegs of it online. It did not show up on any subsequent version of The Graduate. It is back.
What?
And what makes me so happy is Howard Suber was one of my professors, and I have lunch with him. Not since my daughter was born, but used to have lunch with him a few times a year still. It's always a legendary moment. I just sit down and I just sort of feel like I'm in class again and I should be taking notes. Extraordinary guy. One of the great professors of all time at any film school. A wealth of knowledge and not professorial in demeanor at all. When you sit in class and you're talking about Dr. Strangelove, and he lays in and says, you know why he carries around those golf clubs in that golf bag? It's a phallic reference. They used to make golf bags out of elephant penises. That is the kind of critical studies class that you want to be in. In any case, Howard Suber the commentary is as great now as it was then. It is one of the best commentaries you will hear for any movie ever. It is fantastic, you also get an audio commentary from 2007 featuring a conversation between Steven Soderbergh and Mike Nichols, and you get new conversation between Lawrence Terman, who was the producer, and Buck Henry. Documentary stuff, featurette stuff, behind-the-scenes stuff, a 1966 episode of The Today Show, a 1970 Paul Simon performance on The Dick Cavett Show. It just never ends. This thing is amazing, and it's one of the most beautiful Blu-rays I've ever seen. It's fantastic.
True, and also, if you're a student of film, which hopefully you are by virtue of listening to this podcast,
yes,
you might want to get a sense of the historical importance of The Graduate, and how it was one of the nails in the coffin in terms of the 50s and the studio system and how films used to be made versus
fantastic.
All this counterculture. Because don't forget, the idea that Mike Nichols would want shrimpy, Jewish, nebbishy, nerdy Dustin Hoffman to star, because the studio wanted Robert Redford.
I know.
They wanted Robert Redford.
And I have to say this too. Going back to Suber, we watched The Graduate. I got the full spiel on The Graduate in that same comedy class where we talked about Dr. Strangelove, which was great. The best thing that we did in that class was to watch Dr. Strangelove and then Sidney Lumet's his Dr. Strangelove, which is I'm drawing a blank on.
Wait, what is it?
Sidney Lumet's his Dr. Strangelove film, his nuclear threat film.
Oh, Failsafe.
Failsafe, thank you. And we watched those same day, back to back, because the idea being what makes one funny and the other one not, because it's basically the same movie. And legendary lecture. And then talking about The Graduate, Suber showed it because the UCLA archives are right there, and they can pull out anything you need. They've got a whole litany of screen tests for actors who screen tested for the part. Robert Redford, John Gavin. Gavin was like the stiffest guy in the world. And the best screen test which he wasn't allowed to show, but he showed it anyway because he goes, screw it. And he didn't say screw it, but it was great. So we wound up actually seeing a screen test by, take a guess.
Woody Allen.
No, I'll give you a guess. He had a talk show once. He was in Midnight Run.
Charles Grodin.
Charles Grodin did a screen test. Charles Grodin screen tested for that part. You have no idea how funny it is. It's not right. He's just doing the Grodin-y thing.
He's too wry.
Well, he's just being kind of. He's playing it too broad, and he's kind of playing that dumb lunk that he did at the time. Well, what do you mean? What do you mean? What are you talking about? It was so funny. It was so funny. So it's great to see those things, and they're really well shot screen tests. It's not like video. It's on the set. The set is built. Catherine Ross is there. It's shot.
It was shot on a red camera.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. All right, you know what? Hang on. Before we move on, a couple of because we just talked about 2 Frankenstein films. There's a couple more that I just saw in the pile. One is kind of worth renting. This is Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things. It sounds ridiculous. It's from like 1972, but you know what? This is a film that was directed by Bob Clark. Bob Clark is the one who went on to direct Porky's and Christmas Story. So Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things is not just like a zombie movie. It's a funny, low-budget zombie movie. And the good folks at VCI really knocked this thing out of the park. A lot of great special features, Q&As and memories of working with Bob Clark. And there's also the alternate UK version, which is, it's okay. It's not that much different. It is different, not that much different. And there is a commentary track on this thing. And this is a super-duper low budget. It was done for like $50,000. And it's, it's not always super funny. It's a little silly. But still, you're really seeing Bob Clark kind of emerge and become what he would eventually be, which is the guy who did Christmas Story and Porky. So as a little piece of film history, Frankenstein-related or undead-related, Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things. And on the other half of the spectrum, we have My Boyfriend's Back from 1983. This was directed by Bob Balaban.
Oh, my gosh, that's right. I forgot he directed that. Good grief.
Yeah.
Bob Balaban, you know him as the translator in Close Encounters, and if you aren't that old, then you know him probably as the NBC network chief in Seinfeld, and if you don't know him as that, then maybe you know him as kind of a minor supporting character in Altered States. Anyway, he's Bob Balaban.
Altered States. Anyway, this thing is it's just nonsensical. It's just awful. The plot twists are just ridiculous, and the thing is just like it's just nothing. I mean, there's the only reason why you'd want to see this film is because you get to see very young looking Matthew McConaughey. Mm-hmm. I had forgotten that Philip Seymour Hoffman's in this film. If you just like you blink, you miss him, but he's there, and it's got a good cast. But in the end, it's just stupid. Anyway, it's about this guy who comes back from the dead to try to win back his girlfriend. But he should have stayed dead because the movie's terrible.
Okay, so all right, here we go. I'm gonna blow through a bunch of MOD stuff from Fox and MGM. MGM distributes through Fox, so this is all from the same deal. This is the MGM limited edition collection. We have American Friends with Michael Palin, which is not a very good movie from 1993, and it's all very much oriented around kind of a certain British educational subculture. I just can't. It means to be sort of more literate and wry than it actually is. But anything pertaining to Oxford and Cambridge is always kind of a stretch for me. You really have to. It has to be really, really literate and really well written and a great story. Revolt of the Slaves is kind of a standard 1960s era sword and sandal Roman Empire thing. It ain't Spartacus, that's for sure. And it's kind of. The only sort of noteworthy thing about this is that it stars Rhonda Fleming, who was kind of a mid-level starlet who would go on to marry Ted Mann of Mann Theater fame, and that was it. That was done. I think she's still around. Ted Mann passed away years ago. I once drove his car. Did I ever tell you that? When I was an usher at Mann Theaters,
what?
He showed up with the big car, and he like I'm taking tickets, and he hands me the keys and says, "Can you go park the car up at the lot up the street?"
Right.
It was a lot of good fun.
Sure.
I got to drive his car.
Right.
Then we've also got from the Fox Cinema Archives These Thousand Hills with Don Murray, Richard Egan, Lee Remick, Stuart Whitman, it's one of those big melodramatic adaptations of a Pulitzer-winning novel that doesn't really stand up to the novel. It's okay, it's fine. It's a good cast, but it's just a little bit. It's just too much of a vehicle, really. Directed by Richard Fleischer, kind of going through the motions. And then we also have Peter Lorre in one of the great Mr. Moto films, Mr. Moto Takes a Chance. If you haven't seen these, they are borderline offensive, but it's hard to be too offended because they've got Peter Lorre in them. The Moto films, of course, are like they're sort of like Charlie Chan meets Indiana Jones, and that's really the best you can say about them. They're fine. You see a lot of Indiana Jones in these things, and you see a lot of other kind of procedural movies and thrillers from subsequent years. But this is one of the better ones. Peter Lorre is just always wonderful. And then we've got a bunch that are from the Regency library. Now, New Regency, which is Arnon Milchan's company, which produced not only consecutive Best Picture winners in 12 Years a Slave and Birdman, but they also produced The Revenant this last year. And Arnon Milchan has been producing movies for decades. I mean, going back even Brazil and on and on and on. And it's a huge library. Anyway, he's putting out some of his lesser stuff here. A lot of it's been released previously. Now it's on MOD, DVD-Rs from Fox, and it includes Breaking Up with Russell Crowe and Salma Hayek. Bet you didn't know that those two acted in a movie together. That was before Crowe was anybody. The Power of One, which is the movie that introduced Stephen Dorff, basically. This is John Avildsen doing the Rocky/Karate Kid thing all over again, except with from a boxing standpoint in South Africa, segregated South Africa. John Gielgud and Morgan Freeman also in it. Not bad. One of the better things that Dorff has done. He was really young at the time. Goodbye Lover with Patricia Arquette and Dermot Mulroney. Also has, in a small part, Ellen DeGeneres and Don Johnson. Nothing really great here. This is just one of those kind of wannabe screwball comedies with style that never really went anywhere. Carpool. Tom Arnold and David Paymer. Terrible. Absolutely terrible. This is back in the era when everybody's like, we want to do a vacation type movie. People kind of going wacky and they're in a car and they're going from somewhere, but we don't really want them to go on vacation. So fine. Okay, so they just get in a car and they're carpooling and it's wacky. Not funny. The New Age, Peter Weller and Judy Davis, a Michael Tolkien directing effort that kind of falls a little bit flat, but he was kind of riding high in the early 90s, wasn't he? I mean, he wrote The Player.
He had a moment. Well, when he wrote The Player, that he became a player.
Yeah.
And then kind of died after that.
Yeah, he kind of died, and this is sort of a reason. He wrote and directed this, and it's not really... It's sort of one of these movies that wants to be too much about all of the idiosyncrasies of Los Angeles, and Peter Weller and Judy Davis are just a little bit too, I guess, pretentious. And then one of the most dreadful films, truly one of the most dreadful films of the 1990s. I don't know how this got greenlit. This is just appalling. This was like the nail in the coffin of Richard Benjamin's directing career. This was Made in America. You remember this? Whoopi Goldberg and Ted Danson?
Wait, isn't Ted Danson the one who... dressed in blackface?
Yeah.
Was he the guy who did that?
Yeah, he did for a moment. And he and Whoopi Goldberg were also going out about this time. Mm-hmm. They were a couple. This is before he did he veered over into Steenburgen territory. The idea here is it's basically, how do I describe this without just horrifying people?
I mean, by the way, just to clarify that, the blackface, that was a roast for Whoopi Goldberg.
Yes.
So he appeared in a roast for Whoopi Goldberg.
Correct.
In blackface,
yes.
And it was a huge deal at the time.
So basically the idea here is, poor Richard Benjamin, I feel so bad for him. This is basically a sperm donor comedy where with Ted Danson revealed, Ted Danson is like a cheesy car salesman who is revealed as the father of Whoopi Goldberg's child. And it is just not funny in any conceivable way. It is just horrendous.
I once went surfing with Ted Danson.
It's humiliatingly bad.
I once went surfing with Ted Danson.
I don't really even want to know this story.
I did.
Ooh.
See? I actually, he did the surfing. I didn't do my surfing.
Okay. Anyway,
folks, very highly recommended is Jafar Panahi's Taxi. If you're not familiar with Jafar, he is one of the world's most important filmmakers because he is an Iranian filmmaker, and because of the overt political content in his films, the Iranian government has banned him from making films for 20 years. So for 20 years, the Iranian government says you cannot write you can't direct movies, you can't write movies, you can't, give interviews with the foreign media. So basically, because of, can you imagine this in America? I mean, with Donald Trump's America, could happen. With President Donald Trump, could happen. But right now, it's just in Iran. So Panahi, because he was making films critical of the government, he was banned by the government from making films in Iran for 20 years. However, that has not stopped him from making films. He made a great one, ironically called This Is Not a Film, and then now he's got this new one, which is just fantastic, called Taxi. And in Taxi, he spends the day driving around the streets of Tehran, picking up men and women. And
he's so defiant.
He is so defiant.
It's so amazing.
The thing is that, when people think of, like, danger, they think, oh, it's editing and music score, whatever. No, sometimes just making a film is dangerous.
He is so defiant, and he just keeps doing this, and he's banned from filmmaking. He just keeps doing them and sending them out of the country. And it's fascinating because that whole class of amazing Iranian New Wave filmmakers there are only three things that have happened. Most of them have left the country, like Kiarostami, out of the country. And then you have others like Majid Majidi, who are saying, okay, fine, I'll make what the government wants me to make. And they've kind of like, they cry uncle, and he says, I want to make movies in Iran, and this is the only way I can make it. And he's making junk, like he made this Muhammad biopic, which was horrible last year. It was their official Oscar submission. And then you have Jafar Panahi, who's just like, screw it, I'm going to stay here, and you can tell me what I can do and what I can't, but I'm going to do what I want anyway. So screw you.
I mean, this is not
it's
a film.
Amazing.
This is not a film. To me, felt even more dangerous because there were scenes of his cell phone conversations
with his lawyer.
And he's figuring out in his living room how to make this film without actually making the film.
Yeah.
And so there's real danger in this, and that's what makes it so electric. And so Taxi is very highly recommended.
All right, and then we've got a whole bunch here from Olive. Olive Films continues to do a really amazing licensing stuff. They pick up all kinds of great stuff, and they've got a whole bunch of interesting films. They're not all great, but they're all kind of noteworthy from the 80s and 90s in particular. And some of them are even older. And here's one that's even older, Pressure Point with Sidney Poitier and Bobby Darin. There's a buddy pairing that you never imagined ever happened. And what an unusual movie that just really fell between the cracks here. Not just Sidney Poitier and Bobby Darin, by the way, but also Peter Falk is in this movie. It's the strangest combination of characters. Produced by Stanley Kramer and directed by a guy named Hubert Cornfield, which is not a name that any director should have. But it has a certain... Kramer is really all over this. Forget about Cornfield. Kramer is all over this. And it's based on a Robert Lindner story. And here's the idea. It's Peter Falk plays a psychiatrist who is trying to help his black patient, played by Sidney Poitier, get over his hatred of other white people. And from there you flash back into this very, very disturbing backstory involving Bobby Darin, which I won't get into the details of, because the details are meant to be very shocking to you, especially considering that it's Bobby Darin. We love Bobby Darin. It's Bobby Darin. This is a very different Bobby Darin. Anyway, beautiful, beautiful black and white cinematography. Really, really interesting story. Very unusually told. So that is Pressure Point on Blu-ray with Sidney Poitier and Bobby Darin. Bravo to Olive. Really good film.
That's actually an interesting double feature with No Way Out. No Way Out, which was his Poitier's first film, where he plays the black doctor who has to treat the white criminal played by the racist criminal played by Richard Widmark. That's actually a better film than this film.
But this film's kind of lost. It sort of got lost.
Oh yeah, it's totally worth rediscovering.
Worth rediscovering. And then there's more recently Speechless with Michael Keaton and Gina Davis. This was when Michael Keaton was in his first stage of sort of asserting himself as a serious actor. Directed by Ron Underwood. Very nicely done, 1994.
Wait. Now, is that the Michael Keaton who has appeared in 2 consecutive Best Picture Oscar
Sure
winners?
is.
Interesting.
How did you ever think that would happen? 2 consecutive Best Pictures starring Michael Keaton? Didn't we think that he was done? Didn't you feel like he was done?
Although I'll name drop.
Amazing.
I sat next to him at the bar at what's that restaurant on Wilshire Boulevard and 9th Street that used to be a Chinese restaurant and then it became like this trendy thing?
Yeah, I can't remember, but I know what you're talking about.
He was really Michael Keaton. Fast talking, funny.
This is,
I was eavesdropping on their conversation.
He's good in this.
Rusty Canyon.
That's it. Yes, he's good in this. Gina Davis is good in this. This is when she was dating Rennie Harlan, and they produced this together, and it's basically a Gina Davis vehicle. All about speechwriters, competing speechwriters in politics. It's got some observations, but it's not great. But it's kind of, I enjoyed the stars. It was nice to rediscover. So Christopher Reeve is in it as well. It's okay. It's all right. It's all right.
Wow.
Right. Yeah.
Is it my turn to talk now?
Yes, indeed.
A couple more from Olive. These are all marginal films. Moonlight and Valentino kind of hit a little miniature chord when it came out in 1995, but it is very much a women's picture. It's with Elizabeth Perkins, Gwyneth Paltrow, Kathleen Turner, and Whoopi Goldberg, and directed by the guy who directed Rudy, which is funny. Nowadays, you would maybe want to have a woman direct this, but Elizabeth Perkins, who you remember from Big, she just lost her husband, and then she's having trouble moving on from that, and then her friends are there to help her, very much like Beaches and women's pictures like that. What's funny about this film, if you like the rock and the roll, is that there was a moment when John Bon Jovi was trying to become an actor, and he really was not bad. He was kind of good.
He's in U571.
He's good.
I interviewed him. I interviewed him at the junket for U571, and he was clearly stoned, but or seemed to be, but a little too mellow for a junket. Everybody else is pitched, but he's really good in that film. He's really good.
Less successful is Secret Admirer. This is with C. Thomas Howell, Fred Ward, Lori Loughlin, and Kelly Preston. This is kind of a screwball comedy. It's kind of a romantic comedy. It's two disparate tones that David Greenwald, the director, never really wound up meshing smoothly. But it's got a good cast. Dee Wallace Stone is in this. Corey Haim is in this. So Casey Shamasco, who had a moment back in the day, he's in this too. This is from 1985. I would pass on Secret Admirer. Beat Street is funny stuff. Beat Street it's all about these break dancers in South Bronx, and it was from 1984. This is back when the whole
electric boogaloo
breakdancing thing was happening, and Beat Street tried to capitalize on that. So weird. Although it was funny, it was produced by David Picker, and Harry Belafonte.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a movie. This thing definitely rode a wave. It's not a great film, but it's got some good music, Rocksteady Crew, Grandmaster Mel. Come on, Grandmaster Mel. Mel can't beat that. So this is definitely a throwback film if you are of that age. We also have Class. Now, Class, I didn't mind Class that much. This one stars Rob Lowe and Andrew McCarthy. This is from 1983. Takes place in prep school, and it's about an older woman dating one of the prep school kids. This one, not bad. This co-stars Cliff Robertson and John Cusack, and also Alan Ruck from Ferris Bueller. This one, I think, kind of it's a little bit comedic, but it also took its themes pretty seriously when it had to. So, Class actually might be the best of the bunch. Probably one of the worst of the bunch is Amos and Andrew. Directed by a guy named Emax Fry, who had a moment. And this stars Nicolas Cage and Samuel Jackson and the great Dabney Coleman.
Unbelievable, this movie.
And it's just this comedy about this car thief, and and he winds up being hanging out with this hostage, and it's just not funny. Really not funny. This is bad. Sam Jackson looks so young here. You really get a sense of how long, because this is from '93. You get a sense of how long Samuel Jackson has been in film.
Mm-hmm.
Because really, when you think of Samuel Jackson, you think of him like Pulp Fiction onward.
Yeah, I agree.
But really, like he looks like you think of Sam Jackson as being like a really cool looking 60-year-old man, but he's been acting since
forever,
for 30 years.
And our last three on Olive, before we get into the Warner stuff, because I really want to get the Warner stuff in here before we tie the show up. Mystery Date with Ethan Hawke and Terry Polo. What a weird misfire of an eccentric thing this was in 1991. This is one of the films that sort of heralded the end of Orion, right before they were like in the middle of a spate of Best Picture winners, like kind of after Dancing with Wolves and right before Silence of the Lambs, but man, this is just bizarre. You think it's going to be a romantic comedy about a guy who's just in love with his neighbor. This is Terry Polo before Meet the Parents, and then it turns into this bizarre kind of crime thing with a body in a trunk. It's a very odd film, but not bad per se. It's just kind of typical of these strange genre splicing movies of the 90s. A totally underrated movie is Code 46. This was cool, man. Michael Winterbottom film.
You know, this was during my big man crush on Michael Winterbottom.
Yep.
You know, and this one, even though I don't know that it was 100% successful, it was just really cool because Winterbottom he was at the top of his visual powers.
This was after he'd already worked with screenwriter Frank Cottrell Boyce for Welcome to Sarajevo in the 90s, which I saw at Cannes. And this is basically Michael Winterbottom doing a better job of the same kind of story that Wim Wenders attempted Until the End of the World. It is like a near future quasi dystopian thriller. It has a very, very cool vibe to it. Tim Robbins is wonderful. It has sort of a dreamy, ethereal feel. And it's like an intellectual thriller in many respects, and it's just a cool film. It's one of his best films, and I highly recommend this. It's a really good looking Blu-ray. And then the last film here from Olive, which I'm going to give really high marks to, is Sleep With Me, which I thought was a really lame film at the time. And in hindsight, I realize it's a much better kind of love triangle than I ever really gave it credit for. Craig Sheffer, Eric Stoltz, and Meg Tilly, all of whom have kind of gone off the grid in recent years. But this is really a very, very sharp film, directed by a guy that I actually was in school with, Rory Kelly, and it has there's some really, really great, honest acting in it. Rory Kelly's done like next to nothing since, but this is a great independent film from the early 90s. And Rory Kelly, by the way, he was like the guy that I used to rent equipment from at the equipment lab. You know, you go to the desk, and he was this guy who gave you the equipment. Next thing you know, I'm at Cannes in '94, and he's there too with this movie. It was just a wild thing. But the best part of this film is a party scene where Quentin Tarantino explains how everything in Top Gun is a sexual innuendo. And that is worth, you know, it of course is all those innuendos and double entendres are familiar to us, but he did a hell of a job. He did a hell of a job with this movie. Rory Kelly, bravo. Sleep With Me, great film, and really worth checking out. Craig Sheffer, Eric Stoltz, Meg Tilly, and a great supporting performance from Quentin Tarantino. And then, Mark, we've got to talk about a few Warner Archive titles here. Most notably, Big Sleep and Key Largo.
Oh, yeah.
Both of these are a big deal. And they are on Blu-ray from Warner Archive. Both have undergone extensive restoration. And here's the thing that I love on The Big Sleep. The Big Sleep, I think, looks fantastic. I think they've done an amazing job. They also include the 1945 alternate version on here, which many people feel is a better version. The 1945 version, however, it does not look as good as the other, and they have not done a real number on it like I had hoped they would. So that is largely unrestored. But the film itself, the actual release version of the film, is fantastic. Classic Raymond Chandler. You also get a comparison between the two versions on here, as well as an introduction by Robert Gitt. But you know, I mean, as far as the release version of The Big Sleep, this is it. Hopefully, at some point, they'll be able to do the pre-release version, give it the same attention. And Key Largo, I can say nothing about. Key Largo, nothing bad about. Key Largo is a fantastic film, amazing production value. The whole hurricane sequence is still just tremendous. And the editor of this was one of my editing teachers. I'm just going back to film school. I know I'm name-dropping left and right today. But Rudy Fair, who would edit Pritzi's Honor with his daughter, this was one of his big editing gigs back in the golden days. And it's a wonderful, wonderful film. It's a great film. Directed by John Huston, some of his best directing of the era. Richard Brooks and John Huston together wrote the script. How's that for a couple of hard-boiled guys? Right?
No, they're lame.
Richard Brooks and John Huston. Can you imagine being in that room when they're writing together?
Yeah, well, what if Danny Huston was there at the same time?
I'll bet you they were just drinking and punching each other, and then occasionally sitting down and typing something.
John Huston was a...
he was a hellraiser.
He was a hellraiser.
And Richard Brooks, too.
Read the Ray Bradbury book about the making of the writing of Moby Dick.
Yep.
You'll read a lot about John Huston being a real cantankerous drunk.
You sure do. And then the last two are a pair of Hitchcock films, The Wrong Man and I Confess. Two of these...
I love The Wrong Man.
Two gaping holes in the Hitchcock Blu-ray compendium right now. People have been like, okay, so here are the Hitchcock films that we're missing. The Wrong Man and I Confess.
The thing is
and they're both great.
Look, Hitchcock was all about, the innocent man accused of something, got to get himself out of it. And a lot of times that was, Cary Grant or Jimmy Stewart, whoever it was. But Henry Fonda, who was iconic... He was the iconic face of decency in American Grapes of Wrath and Henry Fonda. To see Henry Fonda go through that was a whole different thing. And he's great.
And not only is he great in that, but I Confess is fantastic because of the same thing. Montgomery Clift, who's essentially in the same position as a priest. Where he hears a killer confesses to him, and boom, that puts him into this unbelievable predicament. I mean, it's classic Hitchcock, both of these. They're on beautiful Blu-ray transfers, really, really first rate. There's a great making of documentary on I Confess called Confession, a look at I Confess, and then there's also premiere stuff. And then on the Fonda film, The Wrong Man, there's also a making-of documentary called Guilt Trip, Hitchcock and the Wrong Man, as well as a trailer. You got to add these. If you're a Hitchcock fan and you're missing these, there's a gaping hole in your system. So, that's it. And we are done for this week. Mark, enjoy the birthday party, and we'll be back next week.
Happy birthday to a guy we doesn't know.